All right. Hello and welcome to Art from Heart Beyond the Canvas. I'm Lana, the podcast director at Art from Heart.
And I'm Avni, the founder of Art from Heart.
Well, it's nice to meet both of you. I'm Lewis Goodman.
Yes, so we're thrilled to have
Yes,
you
very
as our
nice to meet
guest.
you.
Uh, Attorney Goodman is a former deputy district attorney, and he has been practicing criminal law for over 30 years. Over those past 30 years, he has seen the judicial system from many different perspectives as Alameda County deputy district attorney, as a private practitioner, and as a judge pro tem. He knows the difficult job law enforcement has in protecting the public, and he is reminded every day of the importance of safeguarding individual rights. His experience makes him deeply aware of the impact that legal and judicial decisions have on individuals, families, and businesses. His mission is to help each client make substantial positive changes in their own lives, and to then use those substantial positive changes to minimize the consequences of the criminal justice system.
Thank you for joining us today, Attorney Goodman, and we're really excited to have you as our guest and share your journey with our audience.
Well, thank you. One thing that I should let you know about my journey going forward is that I'm actually going to be going back to the district attorney's office next month. And after over 30 years of practicing criminal defense, I am going back to the criminal prosecution side of the case.
Oh, wow, awesome. Yeah, great. So, the first question we'd like to ask you is what initially inspired you to pursue your field?
I am of the belief that lawyers are born, not made. I have a podcast, which you may be aware of, called Love Thy Lawyer, and I've interviewed a lot of lawyers. And most lawyers, it seems, knew from a very early stage of their lives that they were lawyers. And then it was just a matter of getting the education and going to law school, passing the bar exam so that they could actually legally practice law. And I consider myself one of those people. I was involved in a debate club when I was in junior high and in high school, and I always had a sense of advocacy for others.
Oh, awesome.
And later on after I graduated from college, I was actually working in a garage on cars. And I'd sort of tried to get away from the notion of being a lawyer through my years in college, but it came back to me in an interesting way, which is that I was working in this garage and one of my colleagues there said to me, well, what happened over there at the university? And I said, what do you mean what happened? And he said, well, I mean, what happened? Did you just drop out? Did you graduate? I mean, what happened? And I said, no, I graduated. He said, I mean, you got a degree? I said, yeah, I've got a degree. I've got a Bachelor of Arts degree. He says, well, don't you think you could be doing something better than this? Meaning better than, pulling engines on cars. And I said, well, I'm sure I could go to law school if I wanted to. And he said, well, you do that, buddy. He said, you go to law school. And I thought about it for a few days and I realized he was right. And I started the application process.
That sounds super interesting.
Yeah.
How long was the gap between you graduating and you heading to law school?
A year. I took a year off between the time I graduated from college and the time I went to law school. And during that period of time, I did leave the garage where I was working, and I worked as a road manager for a band, and it was a jazz band that was supported by Columbia Records, and we traveled all over the United States, and I was in charge of the equipment and the money and making sure that the band was on the road and had what it needed. So I really had quite a bit of responsibility in that job, and I did that during the year between college and law school.
Yeah. So we really love to like analyze the intersection between like creativity and professional working lives. So I was wondering like where do you draw your inspiration from to stay creative in your field, and how does creativity connect with your work?
I think as a lawyer, you have to be creative. You have to think outside the box, so to speak, especially if you're doing criminal defense work, which I've been doing for a long time. You have to be able to figure out ways to creatively and truthfully show your client in a better light than the way the government is trying to show your client. Uh, People are charged with criminal offenses, by and large, because they are guilty of criminal offenses. Uh, Occasionally, that's not true, but it's unusual. And so you need to try and humanize your client. And there are a lot of creative ways to do that. Getting them involved in some counseling or some community service or some rehab program to deal with the issues that got them into trouble in the criminal law in the first place. So in that way, there's a level of creativity. Also, I mentioned I do this podcast, the Love Thy Lawyer podcast. And that, as you as a podcaster know, is a creative endeavor. We do a recording, and then I have a lot to do with the initial edit and create something that is hopefully of some interest for somebody else to listen to. And I've interviewed, over 200 people for the podcast, primarily lawyers and judges, but occasionally someone who's related to the legal community.
Oh,
Wow, that's great. Yeah. I mean, I know like when you do a podcast, it's great because you also get to learn from a lot of people, like whoever you're interviewing. I think like you can learn what their perspective is, and that's also kind of a way to understand someone else's like creative thought process or something like that. So, yeah.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. I mean, I've learned an enormous amount from the people who I've interviewed. Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, great. So, this one's like a fun question, but could you share a memorable or challenging moment in your journey and what you learned from it?
In some ways, I think that we learn more from our losses than our wins. I had a very good friend who I worked with when I first got into the district attorney's office, and he was he was a very good baseball player. He played varsity baseball for Cal Berkeley, and then went on to almost make the majors. He played AAA ball, wasn't really quite good enough for Major League Baseball, so he decided to go to law school. And we put on a hearing together. The judge ended up ruling against us in a way that both of us felt was incorrect. But I remember riding back up to the office in the elevator with him, and he said, you know, in law and in sports, I've always learned a lot more from my losses than my wins. So I think the takeaway from that for me is that don't be afraid to lose. You know, that you've got to try things. If it doesn't work out, okay, try something different, try it a little different way. Think about how you could have done something better. And there's a matter of, like in law or in sports or in podcasting or in any human endeavor, I think that there is the importance of doing reps, you know, of doing repetitions, of the more you do something, the better you get at it. The more podcasting you do, the better a podcaster you'll be. The more lawyering you do, the better a lawyer you'll be. The more, math questions that you challenge yourself with, the better you'll be at math. So don't be afraid to lose once in a while. It's okay. It's a learning experience.
Yeah, I imagine like 30 years of criminal defense, there's been like some cases that are, harder than others when it comes to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And uh, and some people say being a criminal defense attorney is learning the art of losing gracefully. And I think there's something to be said for that, although I've certainly enjoyed a fair number of wins. And I like winning. I like winning as much as the next person. And I work really hard to be a winner and to get wins for my clients. But nobody wins them all. Nobody. And so you've got to be prepared to get up there and swing at the pitches. And, hey, even Babe Ruth struck out 2/3 of the time.
Yeah. So I was really fascinated to find out that you're a podcaster. I think that's just like a really interesting way to probably connect with people in your field. So I guess for our next question, if you could collaborate with anyone, be it, legally or creatively on your podcast, who would it be and why?
I saw that question that you sent me, and I was thinking about that, and I didn't really think of it in terms of someone who is alive today. I thought of it in terms of someone who I would like to be able to collaborate with out of the historical past. And that person would be FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I think that he was an absolutely amazing individual. He overcame enormous physical difficulties. He had polio. He basically confined to a wheelchair through most of his presidency. He took the United States out of the Great Depression. He led the United States during the Second World War. Really an amazing individual. And also, he came from a very wealthy patrician background. And yet, he's one of the really great champions of working class people. So if I had an opportunity to collaborate with somebody, I'd like to collaborate with FDR.
That's a really cool answer. Would you like to interview him or like do a case with him?
Well, I would like to interview him. That's obviously not going to happen. And also, I think that I would have been very, very honored and proud to serve in his administration in some capacity, especially in a communications capacity, because I think that might be a way that I could serve his interests and his needs and helping him create the vision for the country and for the world that he was so instrumental in creating.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's a really great endeavor that someone would be able to do. Awesome. So to conclude today, we just want to ask, what advice would you offer to young people pursuing creative or professional passions?
I think you have to pay some attention to knowing yourself and doing something that you feel is something that you have an interest in, something that you have a passion for, and very frankly, something that you can support yourself with. I also think that it's very important to be willing to start big. In other words, when you graduate from high school, you're going to go to college. When you get out of college, go work for a big law firm. Go work for a big company. Go work for the government. Go work for somebody big before deciding what you want to do. And then after you've worked there for a couple of years, if you want to go to law school, fine, go to law school. You want to do something else, go do something else. If you have an interest in medicine, for example, go work at a hospital. You don't have to be a doctor to work at a hospital. Go work at a hospital, learn something about it. And by going to someplace big to get started, You learn a great deal about how different people work and how different areas of that field can be a place where you can fit into. And then you can niche down into the area of practice that you feel is appropriate. And I also don't think that anyone should try to get an education that's too specific early on. Like right now, we are moving in a technological direction at an enormous speed. We're talking now about artificial intelligence, the internet, social media, all the things that all of us are exposed to. These things are essentially, fairly new to me. I didn't have any education about any of these things because it didn't exist. But what I did have an education about, and what has served me well, is an ability to always be learning, always be reading, always be listening, always getting some new information and learning how to use that and to process it. So my advice would be learn how to learn.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. I mean, especially for your field, like I think that I've heard at least that like being broad is actually a really good advantage because no matter what you study in college, there is some sort of legal application to it in the real world.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're young, be broad when you're young. And then as you get older, you can narrow things down. But I don't think that anyone who is, in high school or college should not have a broad education and a broad understanding. And then, if I may, I just say one piece of financial advice. Most people, I never thought about it when I was in high school. I never thought about it when I was in college. I didn't really think about it until well after I'd become a lawyer, but I wish I'd thought about it a little earlier. And the financial advice is this: start investing in a broad-based stock fund early, something like the S&P 500, with a Fidelity account, or any of these big companies have like an S&P 500, and you're going to invest through the entire economy by doing that investment. And the stock market has been a great investment always. It goes up and down, and you're going to lose a little bit, you're going to gain a little bit, but in general, it goes up. And if you start investing when you're young, you'll have something when you get older.
That's really great advice. We appreciate that. Your views
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard like from my parents too, like how they kind of regret investing in a company like, for example, like Bitcoin or something when they were younger, just because maybe they have some friends who did that just for fun, and then actually like 20 or so years later that was actually a really good investment for them. So, I mean, that's great advice for anyone. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that.
That's the advice I got from my dad.
Age-old advice.
Yeah.
Worked for him, worked for me, it'll work for you.
Awesome.
Right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your incredible journey and insights with us today. It has been such a pleasure hearing about your experiences and the passion you bring to your work. And I'm sure our listeners have gained a lot of valuable inspiration from your story.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Of course. And to everyone tuning in, thank you for joining us on this episode of Art from Heart Beyond the Canvas. And we really hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. Be sure to subscribe and stay connected for more exciting episodes exploring the intersection of art and creativity in all its forms. Until next time, stay creative.